Okay, and hello, greetings everyone, and welcome to the Slam Jam Wrestling Podcast. I am David Pustansky, and greetings. Now, depending which platform you're on, make sure you click that follow, like, subscribe, and all that. Today, we are going to be talking about Vince McMahon having retired from WWE. I think we can literally say that hell has frozen over for this to have happened. This came out yesterday, and I've given myself a little bit of time to digest some of the news. And it's bizarre. Now, for anyone who's been living under the rock, finally, The Rock says no. For anyone who doesn't know this news, Vince McMahon a few weeks ago, there was some allegation came out that he'd had some affair with a paralegal who worked for WWE, and then he paid her off $3 million as hush money. And then apparently a friend of this woman's, she wasn't signed to hush money, so she contacted the board of directors, and then Vince McMahon was suddenly in hot water, and then it was suddenly, Vince McMahon is stepping down as CEO of WWE, and Stephanie is the new CEO, and that he'd continue his role in creative. And then, in true Vince McMahon style, he very braggadociously said, he's going to be on SmackDown that night, and everyone's like, oh my god, is Vince going to come out and retire? Is he going to say goodbye? And he just came out and he said, welcome to SmackDown, then now forever together. And that was it. And now, a few weeks later, he has appeared on Raw. He introduced John Cena, and he was making himself visible, and people were cheering and going crazy for Vince McMahon. And I thought that was a sign that, he's showing everyone that he's not afraid of what's being accused of towards him and everything. But it would seem in the last week or so there was more accusations, and excuse me, they may be up to $12 million, and it's whether or not it was company money. And his lawyer, Jerry McDevitt, said that the money was Vince McMahon's personal money. And here's the thing, right? If Vince McMahon had an affair, is that really something that he should lose his job over? Now, it doesn't sound at all pleasant. You think, poor Linda. But from everything that we know, and earlier this year, Vince McMahon was on the Pat McAfee show, which led to Pat McAfee wrestling at WrestleMania against Austin Theory, which then led to Pat McAfee wrestling against Vince McMahon. And Vince seemed to let slip. He still said, my current wife, Linda. Or my wife, no, that wasn't it. Not my current wife. My wife at the time. Which made it sound like, what, is she not currently or still your wife? And so, if they've not been together for a long time, which wouldn't surprise me at all, it's so if he had some affair, whether or not he's still actually married or not, with someone, is that kind of his own business? Now, obviously, if someone was intimidated, or if someone lost their job, or whatever, it sounds like that's the real problem here. But, once again, if he paid this person $3 million in hush money, and they didn't report to the authorities, and look, I know that that's a very delicate subject, and some people will instantly say, that's crazy that, people suffer, there are victims, and I completely understand that, but we don't know the details of this. So all we do know is that hush money was paid, and this person presumably has the money, and it was agreed that there wouldn't be any further incident or action. So for this now to topple Vince McMahon, and if there were others, and there was stuff about John Laurinaitis, and a lot of the details haven't come to light yet, but what we do know is he's not being said to have committed a crime in that regards, and he has now come out on TV, and to the point, and I know that there's lots of people who are singing Ding Dong Burn the Witch and everything, or Ding Dong the Witch is Dead. Stephanie, when she was then on SmackDown last night, now that she is just definitely the CEO and Vince is retired, she got the audience chanting, "Thank you, Vince." And it was a bit cringeworthy. And they joined along, chanting, "Thank you, Vince." And if that's all happening publicly, then it still is another sign that, well, perhaps nothing illegal or too bad happened. So it seems like the worst thing that happened is whether or not people were paid, like if this woman got a raise, like was paid, like got her money doubled when she was having an affair with Vince McMahon. And then it's stockholders' money, which to me is still something that's a bit bizarre. It might be that this is opening up a can of worms and Pandora's box, and there's going to be tons of things, and that is realistically what the big rumour is at the moment, that there's going to be all these other things. And so that might just be why, well, look, I'll just leave, and then, you know, before things go too out of hand. And now if he's retired, then if they attack him, then it's sort of stepped away from WWE. But I don't know, it's just that if like there's not any major crime, it feels a shame to me that the punishment is that Vince McMahon, for better or worse, and look, over the years there's been so many things that have been said about Vince McMahon which don't sound pleasant, don't sound good. Like, obviously, like, I'll give this as the example. The story that was said, whether it was true or not, that was that after Owen Hart died, and this is nothing like conspiratorial about that, but he met with Bret Hart, and he was afraid that Bret Hart was going to, like, have a gun or shoot him or something, which the hitman didn't bring a gun, but apparently Vince McMahon had a sniper there to point a gun at Bret Hart in case he had, like, brought a weapon. And when you hear about stuff like that, it's like, wow, that sounds heavy-handed or whatever. And when you hear that, well, when you hear things about, like, oh, Vince McMahon was a ruthless businessman and he closed down the territories, and that's all true, you know, that did happen. And when you think, like, oh, I don't like what they're doing on television in the last 15 or 20 years since the Attitude Era, and it's all gone PG, and Vince McMahon's lost his touch, and blah, blah, blah. That may also all be true, but for me, it's still the case that, yes, there were the territories regardless of Vince McMahon, but so much of everything everyone's been watching and will continue to watch for years and years to come is because Vince McMahon had this vision, created this business, made the industry what it is today. And so, look, I haven't heard anything where I'm like, well, this, you know, he might be a bit of a jerk, I might not like this guy if I knew him in real life, or I might not like certain things if they were, like, around me in my everyday life. But still, it's like, well, is everyone going to continue watching WWE? Is everyone going to continue watching wrestling? And, like, Tony Khan, he put out a tweet which was, like, he's now the longest tenured CEO in wrestling, and instantly I was like, no, you're not. Like, surely, like, not just AEW, but like New Japan Pro Wrestling, TNA Wrestling, Impact Wrestling, these things have been around for a lot longer than AEW, and they all have, like, CEOs or equivalents. So it was a weird brag for Tony Khan to do. And also, what I wasn't so keen on with what Tony Khan did there, not that, you know, it's kind of funny in a way, is that if it wasn't for Vince McMahon, he wouldn't be doing what he's doing. And I think that's something that, you know, I think people, like, need to remember in all of this, is that, like, so when you see, like, the tweets from Mick Foley, William Regal, Titus O'Neil, pretty much, like, so many people, if I, like, go onto the Twitter, I'll find a bunch of it, but, like, there's so many people that have written Kurt Angle and, like, tons of people, Matt Cardona, just what the tweets I've seen myself, like, thank you, Vince, you gave me my career, blah, blah, blah. You see someone like Ryback who's like, yes, finally this day, because he's obviously not happy with Vince, and there's going to be a ton of people that aren't happy with Vince, and a ton of people that won't air that they're not happy with Vince, because they're like, well, I couldn't ever air that I wasn't happy with Vince, because then I won't ever potentially get a job back, or I won't get royalties, or there'll be bother for me. And that will still hold true, because it's not like Stephanie isn't the daughter of Vince. And so Stephanie is now the CEO, joint CEO with Nick Khan. And then Triple H was announced a few hours before Vince's announcement on Twitter, which was so bizarre, that Triple H was announced as being the EVP again. And here's the thing, which is what the real purpose of what I'm getting to here. I call conspiracy. Like, I know this sounds crazy, but like literally, we've been watching WWE for however many years, or I have been watching it for most of my life. You guys listening have been watching it for however long you've been listening. And this is absolutely a storyline, what would have happened in WWE. And I'm not saying this is a storyline, but I'm saying like the storylines we get in WWE where, like, obviously just before the Benoit incident, Vince McMahon was blown up by someone. Someone was Vince McMahon's secret child. We get things where there's a corporate ministry and, you know, it was me all along, Austin, and all this kind of stuff, and double turns, and the NWO, and Ric Flair and Donald Trump at various times are the co-owners of Raw or WWE and stuff like this. And so what I smell here is we have been saying for 20 years, since the McMahon-Helmsley era began, that Stephanie and Triple H are just waiting for Vince McMahon to no longer be in charge of WWE so they can take over. And this reminds me of the TV show 24. And I've said this on the weekly Slam Jam wrestling show, on like the video version, which you should check out on youtube.com/extreme improv. But you should check out where I said that the TV show 24, in the first season, it's got the character Senator David Palmer. He's going to be running for president. And at the time, before the era of before the era of Barack Obama, he was being said that, oh, this character would be the first black president, which is what the character ended up becoming. And there was like rumours, there was scandals that his son had been involved in someone's death, and then there was a cover-up, and he was going to come forward and say the truth about this because he'd only just found out. And so his wife, Sherry Palmer, who was like power mad and hungry for power and stuff, tried to get like the secretary or whatever position, some woman that worked for the campaign, to seduce her own husband, the senator, so then she'd have something on him, so then she could control him. And it's like, so Vince McMahon had an affair with a paralegal and then paid her off. I can imagine that Stephanie McMahon put the paralegal up to it, or Triple H and Stephanie McMahon concocted this idea. Or if it wasn't them, then look, Nick Khan only emerged a couple of years ago. And it turns out he's like a childhood friend of The Rock. And The Rock literally bought the XFL from Vince McMahon. And so it's like, so within a couple of years, are we going to see that Nick Khan, who is now the joint CEO of WWE, is going to like suddenly have it so The Rock is buying WWE from Vince? Because here's the thing to remember, Vince McMahon is retiring, but he still owns the damn thing. So if I want to like throw that conspiracy just to the side for 1 second, so it's announced that Nick Khan and Stephanie are the co-CEOs, and Triple H is the EVP. Who are they working for? Who owns it? It's Vince McMahon. So do you think Vince McMahon's daughter and son-in-law aren't going to have like enough swing and power where they can just do his bidding anyway, Vince's bidding? And yeah, they might be waiting till the day where there is no, you know, Vince anymore, and then they can run it how they see fit. Because even if like the conspiracy theory side of it isn't true, you know that they're waiting so that they have control of the empire. You know, Stephanie's going to inherit. Like, Shane didn't get a look in anywhere. And so, look, the suspicions are, one's if it was Stephanie, one's if it was Linda, if Linda and Vince aren't together anymore. That Vince has affairs, so Linda sets someone up and so that it could then be found out at some later date. One's if it was Shane, he was the one that was going to be the heir to the throne, and then obviously Stephanie usurped him decades ago. So one's, you know, obviously he hasn't got control now, yet, but who knows what the future holds, or maybe he just wanted to be like, right, well, if I can't have it, then, you know, Vince, if you're going to give it to Stephanie, then I'm going to make sure that I take it from you. One's if it was Tony Khan, one's if it was Nick Khan, one's if it was Nick Khan and The Rock. You know, there could be any number of people, but just like the way they, have got Vince and got him out, it's like, it's ridiculous. And then Tony Khan puts like a gloating thing, oh, I'm the longest tenured CEO in wrestling. Isn't he like, say, hey, if it wasn't for Vince, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, and say something a bit more gracious. But instead, it's like, yes, this is part of the plan. I've toppled Vince. He's won. He's won in a sense. His enemy was Vince McMahon, and he defeated Vince. He outlasted Vince McMahon. And what was if it was because of him? What was if it was because of Triple H? And then, without Stephanie's knowledge. This is what I think something like this has gone on. And look, this is conspiracy theory. But I think there is more to this than we possibly know. And I don't think it's just as simple as, like, oh, Vince got up to something and there was hush money and Vince is a bad guy. Because he might be a bad guy. But what I think has really gone on is someone has decided to remove Vince McMahon from the throne. This is like Game of Thrones level stuff, in my opinion. And the question is, what happens next? Because obviously there are other people in the organisation. There's been a lot of change in the organisation. Like a few months ago, Triple H, before we knew that he'd had his cardiac event, his health scare, suddenly it was that Triple H was no longer in charge. And maybe the event had happened by then and they just didn't announce it for a few weeks whilst they were evaluating how he is. Earlier this year, they sort of like, oh, Stephanie's like taken out off her position. And so then suddenly Vince is taken out of his position and suddenly Stephanie and Triple H are back. But when Triple H was out of his position, and even if it was because of the health thing, suddenly it's like Regal is gone, Road Dogg is gone, Scotty 2 Hot is gone, all of the people, and like Karrion Kross is gone, and everyone who was like Adam Cole is gone, everyone who was part of Triple H's design in NXT was gone. So many of them. And so, was this a case of, we need to get Vince out for his own good? Because I was building the future, Triple H perhaps would be saying, and Vince has gone crazy, and maybe Vince saw that this, this positioning was happening to usurp him. And maybe that's why all of Triple H's people were removed. Maybe that's why, like, Bruce Pritchard was suddenly the head of creative for Raw and SmackDown. What happens to Bruce Pritchard now? What happens to Kevin Dunn now? Who from the Vince McMahon era will still be involved? Like, it was said yesterday, and look, Brock did appear on the show, that Brock heard that Vince was gone. He's like, if he's gone, I'm gone. And this is like the whole Bret Hart situation, where when Bret was forced out of WWE, basically, the Montreal screw job, and he was screwed over, and so obviously then he had he punched Vince in the face. Like, Rick Rude left WWE after that happened. Mick Foley left WWE for a day and then went back. Undertaker wasn't happy but didn't leave. Other people perhaps weren't happy. I don't think I remember about anyone else leaving. And when it comes to it, look, other people could have stood up against Vince McMahon then. What would have they done? Because Vince owns the company. They couldn't have carried on without him. And so I understand why people stayed. But everyone just stayed. Now, if everyone who was like a Team Vince person now was like, if Vince is leaving, then we're all leaving, then the board of directors would be overturned. Vince has, he could have rallied his people to be like, look, I want you to stand with me. We're going to weather this for a few weeks or whatever, and then we'll get through it. Because ultimately, the board of directors, whoever this board is, who is deciding the fate of WWE and everything, they mean nothing to me personally. But if suddenly Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns and Randy Orton and John Cena, and even if it was like The Undertaker and anyone from the past, the present, the future, all said like, look, we don't want this change to happen. We're not just going to go along with this. Just some scandal comes out and then the guy that's run this business for 40 years is ousted. And this isn't me saying that I am Team Vince, but I kind of think this is Like, it's an unbelievable situation that's happened. I smell conspiracy theory here. I don't think this was the fitting end to Vince McMahon. And I think as a wrestling fan, you might say, well, look, I like wrestling. I don't care about Vince McMahon. But if you watch any of the wrestling from, like, the 80s through to now, WWE, then it's like it's Vince McMahon's fingerprints all over it. So either you have to be on board with the fact that you're supporting, like, the Vince McMahon endeavour, or you know, it's kind of like a... I don't know how people can take the position of, well, this was just okay that this legacy and everything just ends like this, and we're seeing this happen over and over again, and I'm not such a fan of it. Now, if people are bad, if people have committed crimes, then, you know, deal with those crimes. There are authorities. These things are there for a reason. But just someone being forced out of a position, and this, like, what will happen to WWE without Vince McMahon? Time will tell. Maybe it will be a hell of a lot better. Maybe for the next 6 months we're going to be like, oh, this is amazing now. And then we'll find out, well, Vince is just telling Stephanie and Nick Khan and Triple H what to do, just unofficially. Like how Vince Russo was the unofficial advisor of TNA, which ended up bringing down Dixie Carter and costing them, like, their deal on, like, TNT network or Spike TV or whatever it was called at the time. You know, it's a real weird situation. And everyone that, like, just, like, celebrates, like, ding dong, the witch is dead. It's just like, I'm not so on board with that. Like, there's definitely stuff where it's like, well, this sounds bad about Vince or whatever. But until we know more details on it, all it means is that the thing that we've been watching for decades has just suddenly been changed because of rumour and scandal and a board of directors who probably are just afraid that, oh, if there's a scandal means something bad, and something bad means that it can affect, like, the stock market. So was this the right decision? Because Brock Lesnar doesn't seem to think so. I'm sure The Undertaker doesn't think so. Kurt Angle thanking him doesn't think so. You know, Mick Foley doesn't think so. And it's like, I look up to Mick Foley or Kurt Angle and people like this. And it's like, well, if they're all thanking Vince, so is everyone meant to be angry at Kurt Angle now? Is everyone meant to be angry at Titus O'Neil for thanking Vince? Is everyone meant to be angry at Paige, who thanked Vince? And then Paige, excuse me, then, like, shared something which was a little bit anti-Vince by saying, like, the whole Sasha Banks, Naomi thing, saying about was it about the Brock Lesnar, that Brock Lesnar said he's not going to be there. So, and then she was like, oh, you're going to say Brock Lesnar has left unprofessionally. My opinion on that is, if you didn't like that order came from Vince McMahon to say that all these people have walked out on their championship belts and we think this was unprofessional, and you didn't like that came from Vince McMahon, now that Vince McMahon is gone, are you saying to continue that behaviour that you didn't like when the person who gave the order to do that behaviour you didn't like is no longer there? It's a really interesting developing situation, and there's going to be an awful lot of stuff come out about it in the following days, weeks, months, and years. This was, like, one of the most significant things to ever happen in pro wrestling. Now, I'm just going to have a quick look at the wrestling Twitter. I'm going to have a look at a couple of wrestling news websites, and I'm just going to see if there are any, like, breaking updates on any of this, just whilst on the air here. So let's go on to the Slam Jam Twitter account, and let's see what's on the news feed. Now, this might be completely old news by now. The world moves so fast. So obviously, as the time I'm talking now, Death Before Dishonor, Ring of Honor show is going to be tonight. Oh dear, let's see what else there is. Yeah, like Paul London's coming out saying about stuff anti-Vince McMahon, but we're going to hear from people who are anti-Vince McMahon. Like, you hear from John Cena, John Cena says, look, I give Vince McMahon 10% of my money just because I use the name John Cena, even though it's my actual name. And he says because without Vince McMahon, without WWE, he wouldn't have been anything. And then you'll see someone like CM Punk who's very anti-Vince McMahon. And look, I'd say in the CM Punk case, that's justified. I am absolutely Team Bret Hart against Vince McMahon. Truthfully, when Vince McMahon screwed Bret and Brett went to WCW, I was rooting for WCW to do well. But, you know, it's just a very weird set of circumstances. I'm not spotting anything major here. It's Renee Paquette, so Renee, whatever her name was, but Moxley's wife. Let's see what she says here about Vince McMahon. Or, oh, it's a video, I can't watch it. But it says here, she thanked Vince McMahon for everything she learned from him, and excited to see what Stephanie will bring. I think this is so super interesting. We're going to learn so much about what the reaction is, because the reaction at the moment you can't 100% trust. I do believe when Foley or Angle or whoever is thanking Vince, I'm sure there are a lot of people speaking to Vince saying that, you know, this is BS, basically. You know, there's going to be a lot of people that aren't happy. And we'll see, perhaps, like we heard Brock Lesnar wasn't happy, and maybe this means that he'll turn up, do a 2-minute job at SummerSlam to Roman Reigns, and it's like, well, now I'm done. And maybe he'll be like, well, maybe Vince McMahon will seriously be like the storyline where he's like, I'm bringing in the NWO to kill WWE. I'm going to kill my own creation. What was if Vince McMahon turned up on AEW? It's not going to happen. His daughter's running WWE. But what if he was like, well, do you know what? I'm 77. And it's like, my family's set for life. I don't want to lose to the competition. But also, I've been forced out of something. So I'm just going to tell Brock, look, you know, just do this show and then you'll go to AEW. I'm going to go to AEW. Or I'm going to tell The Undertaker to go to AEW. We might get a lot of people, if they were Vince McMahon guys, just be like, screw this, and then it's going to really change the industry. The industry will be different now because of this. Anyway, that's going to wrap this up here. I know that I've tried to give a balanced view on this, and absolutely, I'd say that, look, and I will stick by this. I'm not trying. I don't want people to think it's overly controversial, because I just want to know more. But at the moment, I'd say I don't think this is the way this should have happened. I think that was a mistake. And when we learn more, if there was reasons where, then, you know, we can all say, well, we've got egg on our face, or some people will say, well, I didn't. But people can say, like, oh my God, they had us chanting thank you Vince, or they had the audience chanting thank you Vince, and people went crazy for Vince when he came out on Raw and introduced John Cena and stuff like this. If we find out anything really bad. But if we don't, then it's like, well, then this was not a fitting end to the Vince McMahon, owner of WWE story. That's going to wrap things here for now on the Slam Jam Wrestling podcast. So make sure, if you're wherever you're listening to this, smash the subscribe button. We do have a new Slam Jam Wrestling show channel on YouTube. It's just got a couple of videos on there at the moment, and they're like wrestling figure reviews or stuff like this. But the podcast and the weekly show, they're going to end up on there more and more. So check those out. For now, if you're listening to this on an audio podcast, iTunes, Google Podcasts, whatever, give us a subscribe. And until next time, ciao for now.